Bienvenidos a Caminos Culturales. Yo soy Chuy Martínez. Este programa es dedicado a nuestra comunidad de habla hispana. En este programa exploraremos el arte, la poesía, la música, la historia de nuestra comunidad. Y ahora veamos lo siguiente. Bienvenidos a su programa Caminos Culturales. Mi nombre es Chuy Martinez, and as our custom, we have some very interesting talks and conversations with leaders, community members, and people that had made a big difference, not just in the city of Albuquerque, but in the state and even beyond that. Well, today we have one of those iconic community members. He's been an activist, he's been a human rights activist, he's been an education activist, and community activist. He's done it all. And besides that, also, he's an artist. So I am very honored to have a conversation with him in this program. Bienvenido. Dad, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I come from the family that was the community of los Martinez, named after, of course, it's called Martinez Town today. And people say, how did it get the name Martinez Town? Well, the way it got the name Martinez Town is when we started getting bus service in the late 40s, early 50s. You know how they put the marker about where the bus is going? And somebody came up with the idea of calling it Martinez Town. And the people got really upset. They didn't like it to be called Martinez porque siempre it was always called Los Martinez. That Martinez Town was my great-grandfather's ranch.
Wow.
It extended, his property extended from about what is now Martin Luther King almost to Manal, and then from about University, which is just above the Sand Hills, close University Boulevard, to what is now Broadway, and that's where all our family grew up, and then people who weren't necessarily related to us by the name Martinez would come to Albuquerque, and their name was Martinez, and they would move to los Martinez, como Frank Martinez.
Frank, yeah, of course, yeah.
Frankie's family was from Guadalajara, and when they moved here, eran mineros, they were miners, and they moved to Martinez. There were a lot of families that were not related to us, but we consider them all relatives, as we all had the same surname. And anyway. But I wasn't born in Martinez, I was born in Alameda, because my grandfather had a rancho there, where El Pinto restaurant is?
Yeah.
The El Pinto, that's where I was born, right on that property. In those years, that whole area would get flooded. So my father figured we better move back to Martinez, to Los Martinez. And I went to school at Longfellow, and then when I was in the sixth grade, one of my cousins had been going to El Rito, which is up in northern New Mexico, and I was a sixth grader. I went up to the boarding school over there with him, and they had a typhoid epidemic, and I got typhoid, and I was out of school the whole sixth grade year, and I came back to Albuquerque, and then continued my elementary education and secondary education here until I was in the 10th grade. Then went back to El Rito, and I graduated from El Rito, and then from El Rito, I came to UNM, and then from UNM, during the time I was at UNM, I got drafted. Me and Elvis Presley got drafted on the same day, 1957, and I remember sitting around with a play with the guys over there, and somebody was laughing that Elvis Presley had just gotten drafted, and we all were laughing about it because they're going to have to cut his hair and all that. That afternoon, I went over to a secretary over at the Human Center. She used to keep my messages. She says, "Your mother's trying to reach you." so the university from my house in Martinez was less than 2 miles. So I went home, and my mother said, "You've got this document here. Looks like," she thought it was my tax return, because it was in the middle of April. So she hands it to me. It was my draft notice. So at that time they weren't drafting too many people. But then what happened? I had not applied for a draft deferment. So the way I got out of the draft, I volunteered for an officers training program. So I went to Virginia to OCS, came back, graduated from the university, became an officer, and wound up going into the Marine Corps for 5 years to avoid a 2-year draft, which doesn't make sense, no. But anyhow, then after I came back, I went to teach over at Rio Grande High School. And then from Rio Grande High School, I went to work at the university, worked on various programs around the state where we were working. I was in one really good program where we worked with these small school districts to help them get grants for the various. I worked in Las Vegas, for example, up in Silver City, places like that where there was a large Hispanic populations, and also because they were, in those years the rural areas didn't do as well for the legislature as the bigger communities. And then let me see, where am I here? After my time at the university during the Anaya administration, I went to work in higher education, and there for a few years. And then after that, I was eligible to retire. I had enough years between. I bought my military retirement, so I was able to retire and I wanted going to Central America in the Peace Corps, where I worked also in education programs there with Salvadoran refugees, and then came back and started working at TVI part time. Then before long, I became the president, and I did that.
Were you one of the founders of TVI? Just TVI started
no
before you?
No. The founding president of TVI was Luis Saavedra.
Oh, okay.
He was the first president. He was there 30 years.
He's
and I was the second.
Former mayor.
Former mayor. He ran. Okay. No, he was president first, and then when he retired, he ran for mayor, served 4 years mayor, and then passed away. But I became president after Saavedra. There's only been, TVI has been around for 60 years and only had 6 presidents, and I was the second one.
Wow. Yeah, it was it's one of the most successful vocational programs. Now it's called CNM.
Well, what happened is they added nowadays vocational programs, if they have a little more in the area of math and some of the liberal arts, students qualify for what they call an Associate of Arts degree. And so a lot of people thought that, well, maybe we ought to make this, it's what is normally called a community college. So it became a community college, but its primary emphasis, it still is vocational education. And they have probably one of the best in the country. And they've had very, very successful, they have really first class faculty and first class administration. I'm really proud to have been a part of it. Yeah,
and that's where you're more well known because of all the programs that you implemented. There was no other program, and I'm sure a lot of other cities apply that model, like in Vegas with Luna Vocational.
I think what happens to many community colleges, I'm not saying all of them. What happens to many community colleges, they try to replicate what universities do. They want to have an athletic program, they want to have fraternities, they want to have all these other things. And actually, I think the vocational programs are best if they make it possible for somebody who's not sure well, let me put it this way. Nowadays, if you have a training and certification as a plumber or an electrician, the wages are very good. It's not surprising that we have students at CNM TVI that have bachelor's degrees, but go on to get a technical.
Oh yeah,
especially in computing and the other thing people don't realize that most technical programs now require computing or a knowledge of mathematics. It's no longer. In the old days, we still think the old timers, people my age and before, still think of vocational education as somebody with a hammer and a saw. You know,
Yeah, no,
it's a heck of a lot more than that. Yeah.
And big companies recruit a lot of students from those programs.
A lot of companies, we do, TVI, CNM does a lot of training for companies when they come here. Intel, we helped establish the initial training programs for Intel when they came.
Wow.
Another one, General Mills, the one that makes cereals. You think, now, why would General Mills want to have? Because they have assembly lines. And so what we did, when they were going to come to Albuquerque, they visited with us and they said, could you replicate one of the equipment that we have here? And we sent our instructors to their plants in Michigan where they trained. They came back and set up the system. We didn't have to build a new building. We used their facilities. Truck driving. When we started truck driving at TVI, the companies that needed truck drivers were the ones that were providing the trucks. And the other thing that CNM does, and TVI did as well, we did that. We never try to train people for a market that doesn't exist. We would have, when the truck driving program came in, the industry came over and said, we need truck drivers because now there's going to be more requirements, the equipment is more sophisticated, there's going to be more drug testing. Truck drivers tend to take a lot of stuff to stay awake, and that really, affects the safety. It's a safety feature. So they provided the trucks, and then we said to them, okay, how many do you need to train, and how long, and how many of these people will you hire immediately after the training? And so they gave us a number. I can't remember. I think it's 15 or 20 every 3 months. And I remember at the end of 4 months, I think 10 of them had not been hired. I mean, only 10 had been hired. So all we did was call that. We had a committee. It was an industry committee. It's an advisory committee that recommended the numbers of people we ought to train. Say, hey guys, we still have 5 or 6 guys running around here they haven't gotten a job yet. Sure enough, they picked them up quickly. And the market for CNM, for example, I'm sure it's still true. The market would be from Dallas to Phoenix and all of New Mexico. That's who we were training. The same thing with legal assistants. We had a committee made up of the legal community, from the Bar Association, that recommended. They not only advised on the curriculum, because they were mostly lawyers teaching it, but not only advised on the curriculum, but they also told us what number they thought the legal community would, and that's the way they operate. See, that's the mistake that a lot of other community colleges do not make. The mistake that they make is that they're not looking. I don't know what the needs of the area of Las Vegas are, for example, but you may be training for the wrong things,
So you had to
or
make
you may
sure.
not be training for the things that you really need.
Yeah. So many people that I know that attended TVI back then went on to college. I mean, to university.
Well, they could a lot of the classes transfer.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Did that program started from the beginning?
Yeah, what they did is there was we set up early on a series of classes that you could get credit either way. My son, for example, he went to TVI and became an electrician, and then he worked as an electrician for about 4 or 5 years. He was a journeyman, and then he decided he wanted to go to he got married and decided to go. His wife wanted to go to university, so they went down to New Mexico State. So he took his transcript, and he had already had classes that were, in other words, they have a list of classes that they compare what's being taught in each, and then you get credit. He wound up with about almost a little over 2 years of credit. Wow. when he went to New Mexico State. Mm-hmm. And I remember his advisor who, down in New Mexico State didn't show up, so the chairman of the engineering department, of the electrical engineering department, was the one that was, advising him. And he said to him, "Oh, here's a couple of classes that you took at TVI. What did you learn there?" Because he couldn't come. And my son told him, so I gave him credit for those too. And then when he left, then from Las Cruces, he got his degree in Las Cruces in electrical engineering, and then they told him in Las Cruces, the field of engineering right now, you could get a job outside the state. But he says the demand for electrical engineers is going to be better in a year, so go get your master's. So my son went, and then the head of the department had a deal with Sandia, where Sandia would paid for my son's, not only my son but a bunch of other students, paid for his. It took 2 years to get his master's, and he paid for his master's degree, paid for his classes, got him a computer, and gave him a stipend. And then he worked in the summers, for 2 summers. He worked at the labs in Long Island. It's not as big as Sandia, but it's one of those nuclear labs over at the north end of Long Island in New York. When my son had to make the commitment that he would work for Sandia at least 5 years. So when he graduated from the university, got his master's, he went to work for Sandia. That was 30 years ago. Now he's with a nuclear anti-proliferation program, big job, and he's about ready to retire now. Mm. I mean, that's
what a success, and that's why I was going to say. TVI trained some brilliant minds that are now into so many different jobs. I know that they're talking about your son. My son attended TVI, and now he works for also does contract work for SpaceX, for example.
Yeah.
He's a wizard, mathematical wizard. He's got his own business and everything, so he does a lot of work for the government.
Yeah, well,
but she started at TVI.
Sure. Well, what's the good about community colleges is you're not making a big investment right away in terms of time. You can experiment. You can try different things. You can try different courses. You can try different fields. When I went to UNM, I remember you had to declare your major right off. Practically after the first year, and you never got really good advice in those years at all universities. I'm not picking on any university in New Mexico, but that's I'm a great believer in community colleges, and I think that well, we more people are getting an education now than ever. It's a growing, a growing population.
Mm-hmm. So now going into another subject, but still part of your life, your father, Luis Martinez, whom I respect a lot, and it's interesting because I knew of Luis Martinez way before I even met you or any of the family, because of his
Corridos,
Los Corridos.
Mm-hmm.
And the daughter of Senator Dennis Chavez gave me a 45 record.
Mm-hmm.
And it was written by Don Luis Martinez. So he was one of the people that wrote more corridos that I know in modern times, and poems.
Yeah. Well, the right of the tradition of corrido is a long time New Mexico tradition, and there were every community. By that I mean every town. Every town had its own poets, its own
escribanos, or what they call them.
And for fiestas, any fiestas you had, the poets would. I remember when I used to go with my dad, and the way the poets would do, they would print their poems in just one single sheets, and we'd go to Las Vegas or on a weekend or wherever they were having a fiesta, and my after each one got up and read their poetry, you would sit with your little table with your sheets of poems, and people would come and buy them. Their tents. I met a guy. I met a guy from Chirili one day. He had a book like that, full of almost all my dad's poems, but poems from all over. And then, you know what they call slam poetry nowadays?
Oh, yeah.
That's an old New Mexico tradition. You would get up extemporaneously and in poetry debate. And my dad, we've got the poem here. So my dad at the age of, I think he was like 17 or 18 years old, debated the guy who was considered the top poet in Cuba, New Mexico, and so forth. And everybody agreed that my dad had beat this older man, And that man wrote a poem honoring my dad about him losing to my dad.
Oh, really?
But when I saw these kids nowadays, the slam poetry is a big deal now. That's an old New Mexico tradition. And if you were running for office, and if you were a serious politician, you had to have a corrido composed of you. Whether you were Anglo or Hispanic, everyone. My dad wrote corridos for Dempsey, for Anderson, for you name them. Tom Wiley, all of these different, and then for Dennis Chavez, of course, that was the one. It was best known because it got recorded. And what happened? He first wrote the first corrido he wrote for Dennis Chavez. The first version was when Dennis Chavez was running for Congress. He was running for the House of Representatives. Then when he ran for the Senate, he rewrote the corrido to apply for the Senate. And then when Dennis Chavez was going to run for re-election, I was like 13, 14 years old. The senator's son came over to the house, Dennis Jr., and he said to my dad, Tito Guisar has gotten to be a real good friend of my dad's, and my dad wants Tito Guisar to record the next recording, because before it was just a trio, and it was made up of just la plebe, my couple of my cousins. They were good singers too, but no Tito Guisar, or Tito Guizar. ¿Cómo le dicen?
Tito Guizar.
Yeah.
As I understand, he came here. No,
Oh, I know. But anyway, so what happened is Tito Guizar had somehow contacted my dad, and he said he wanted my dad to go to California. So I went with my dad. We took the train, and I was with my dad in the studio in Hollywood where it was recorded, because Tito Guizar at the time was also a movie actor, and he was doing a lot of Western. And then years later, people said, one day somebody from Chicano Studies got up and said that Tito Guizar was the one that had composed Dennis Chavez's corrido. And boy, I'll tell you, we heard about it, man. We just, no way,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't.
Yeah,
Tito
well,
Guizar.
many people.
Tito Guizar sang it, but he didn't record. He
Right.
wasn't the one that. So Enrique La Madrid and Demetria went into the archives and found the original stuff that my dad did on Dennis Chavez, the original when he was in the house, and anyway, you know, we and I got to know the senator because when I graduated, I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Marines, and I was stationed for a year in Quantico, Virginia, and it's just a short distance from Washington, and I had met the senator, but he didn't remember me. And then they had a tradition that for different ceremonies, they always have a Marine lieutenant escort a senator. And so they said, Martinez, you're going to escort your senator from New Mexico. And I said, which one? He said, Dennis Chavez. So I had never met the senator, so he knew my dad real well. So I show up, and he said, well, Dennis Chavez, he said, ¿Y de quién hijo eres? You know, Dennis knew every family in New Mexico. You just give him your name, and give him two relatives, and he could give you your whole genealogy. He'd tell you who you were related from the day one, you know. He had that ability. And so I told him, I'm el hijo de Luis Martinez. Oh my God, you know, think, and so he wanted me to go to work for him after I got out of the Marines. And for some reason, I decided to extend another year in the Marines. We had I hadn't quite, my wife and I had quite decided whether we were going to stay in California or come back to New Mexico. Because teacher salaries in California were a lot better in those days in California than they were here. But she wanted to come here, and I wanted to stay in California because I had relatives over there también. So we said, well, let's stay another year. And so I didn't take the job. Guess what happened to Dennis that year that I didn't take the job? He passed away.
Wow.
So he passed away, and the governor was Meacham, who was a Republican, and he resigned as governor, and the lieutenant governor appointed him senator. So I would have been without a job, because those jobs that you got with the congressional delegation were political jobs. You know, if you didn't have a sponsor, you were out of work. The guy that took the job in my place was a guy by the name of, maybe you knew him, his name was Metzger. He was from the South Valley, Raza with the name Metzger. And he went to law school, and he was there his first year. He had little kids and everything. He was the job that had been offered. He took that job, and then the senator dies. He go, if it wouldn't have been for some congressman from somewhere that just happened to have been appointed or elected,
he
gave me the job. He says, I don't know how, I would have had to quit and come back home because I didn't have any work. So it's amazing how sometimes you make decisions that affect your life forever, you know.
Yeah, so this book that you guys just finished on Don Luis Martinez, does that have a lot of information from the?
Yeah, it does. It has a lot of background information on my Catholic or Presbyterian or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, my great grandfather gave him that property for the church. Actually, had given him a little bit a smaller lot further up there on Edith.
Oh, the one on Edith and Lomas.
But no, the one on Edith and Lomas is the last one.
Oh, that's the other one by, ¿cómo es que se llama? On Edith and Indian School, no?
No. The one that he gave him first was right. You know where Maggie's Street is?
Mm-hmm.
Turned in there. Then in that area was a very small lot, mm-hmm. and they had their first church there. Then he gave him the land, and then the Catholic side of the family was very hurt because they didn't get anything, and so in the 20s, my grandfather Trinidad Martinez gave him the land for San Ignacio Church.
Oh yeah, they went up in the hill.
Yeah, that. But as far as Manol, I don't know that it could have been, but I don't know.
I read somewhere that it was part of the family. But your family has had so much history there, no?
Those days
fighting for a lot of those, in more modern times, fighting for the. Wasn't that where the convention center was, or not the convention center? What was that round?
Oh, the Civic Center.
The Civic Center.
Yeah.
I remember going to the Civic Center I remember going to
Fats Domino.
wrestling and all that.
Fats Domino. I went to Fats Domino there, Little Richard.
Yeah. So it was near that.
Yeah.
It was right there.
That property, it was no longer in the family, but I think it was owned by the city then, mm-hmm. and they built it as a Civic Center. But it turned out to be a bomb. Mm-hmm. Because it was, the acoustics were terrible, and it only they could only use it for actually a few rock concerts, but it became a place for wrestling matches, and for basketball tournaments and stuff like that. Because what they did is they made a mound of dirt. Then first of all, they did the pillars. The pillars, they built it like a kiva, not a kiva. What do you call it?
A dome.
Yeah, it was a dome, and they put the dirt and put the pillars and then the dome, and then they put in dirt, and then they put the concrete on top because it was all set. And then after the concrete dried up, they took the dirt out. So then they filled it in. Well, the problem was that the acoustics were terrible. Mm-hmm. And we had, when I was in college, I was very involved with the Newman Center, mm-hmm. and the Newman Center wanted we were building a new building, so we were having fundraisers. So we got the priest there had grown up with the wife of Bob Hope. Dolores Hope was her name, and she got Bob Hope to come and do a couple of fundraisers, and then of course Bob Hope made a lot of fun of our. He made a joke out of it, but then Dolores got Gordon McRae to come and do Oklahoma. Remember the movie Oklahoma? Mm-hmm. Well, it had been a musical. Before it had been a musical, and Gordon McRae said afterwards he'd rather sing with a bucket over his head than sing at the Civic Center. Well, horrible. Uh-huh. So finally, that's why I was knocked out. It couldn't be. Mm-hmm. It couldn't really. It didn't have a function.
Right.
And nobody wanted it. They even offered it to APS for us to use it as for a high school. It's too small. The area's too small. Mm-hmm. You have to have, for a high school, you got to have 40 to 50 acres. Now the land where the new Albuquerque High is now, that land originally was my grandfather's, mm-hmm. my great grandfathers, he gave it to my aunts. They mined it for gravel.
Gravel, yeah.
And then it was bought. They sold it to Springer Gravel. They had it. Anyway, APS. I was on the school board when the school board bought it for building the new Albuquerque High. It turned out to be, perfect place for that high school.
Yeah. Well, Albuquerque High is
But
probably...
we had to, but that was controversial because we had to. Albuquerque High was losing population because the district of Albuquerque High is in the middle of town, which is the older part of town, losing population. It's like West and East. West Las Vegas is losing population, and East has always been growing, or used to. I don't know now. So the people in Highland High School was always growing. So we split the population, and the people up here didn't want to go to Albuquerque High, and so we had a hell of a. I was on the school board. We had a hell of a fight over that, but we finally got it done. Now it's probably the best in terms of its offerings. Albuquerque High probably has the best offerings.
And it's got a lot of history because it was probably one of the most progressive as far as offering. Programs for Hispanics.
Well, what they would do, which was really great, let me tell you again, what the people who designed the curriculum, I think I wasn't a part of that, but I was part of approving it. And I really was impressed. For example, no high school had enough demand for a particular program that was really either very high tech or was such advanced, for example, an advanced class in mathematics that couldn't be offered in any school. So they would offer it in Albuquerque. They call it the Career Enrichment Center. They call it, and the students would be bused from the other high school. So you would create the numbers that you needed to be able to offer that extra class. You couldn't afford you couldn't offer it to replicate it, in any other high school, and since it's in the center of town, it was easy to bring it in there.
And I remember when they invited Corky Gonzalez, for example. Corky Gonzalez was the Crusade of Justice
from
Denver.
Yeah.
I remember when Jose Angel Gutierrez came there. Cesar Chavez, which you were part of that at the university. You were involved with the LULAC. I remember all that because I worked with LULAC back in the late 70s and early 80s. There when they had the education program, we used to recruit students for.
I remember. LULAC had been very active in New Mexico, and one of the founding members of LULAC was Dennis Chavez. Back when it was LULAC, and actually they were big in Las Vegas, New Mexico. That's where one of their biggest chapters was in Las Vegas. And then when the war started, the Second World War, well, everybody went to California either to work in California or they went to the service. So it kind of because they used to have big fundraisers, and they used to have a black tie event in I think it was at Old Town at the Casa de Porvenir, le decían. Remember those old-fashioned places that they built in northern New Mexico to raise money for the poor, and they were called Casas de Porvenir. And they had them all over northern New Mexico. We used to call them SPMDTU. We used to say, you know what SPM, we used to say in El Rito what SPMDTU meant? Some poor Mexican died tied up. Because they were very active. They were very active in those farming communities, because a lot of people were poor, and everybody was a subsistence farmer, and so somebody dies in Martinez Town, somebody would die, You know, you didn't have insurances or anything like that. So they would have an insurance to help pay for. Mostly, they would help pay for they had a death benefit to it, you know, so and to help widows and orphans. And my dad was a charter member of the one in Martinez. It's since been knocked down. It became a solar place for making solar. But my dad was 24 years old when they built the one in Martinez. They had one in Old Town. They had I think they had them for sure in Las Vegas, Santa Fe. They had them different places, you know. Yeah.
Ted Martinez has not only been a part of this community as rooted as he just told us about his background, his family, and all that, but he's also a human rights activist. Ted, tell us a little bit about your involvement with the migrant programs, for example.
Well, that kind of started after I retired. The first time. Let me call you back. I'm going to call you back. I'm being interviewed by MSNBC, and no, I'm just kidding. No, it's no. I'll call you back. Yeah, no, that's not MSNBC. I'm just joking. All right, okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Desert.
Right. What happened when I went into the Peace Corps? I got assigned. It's a long story, but I got assigned on a project there in northern Belize to help. Basically, they said, we've got all these Salvadorans coming to Belize. Belize has a population of about 300,000 people, and they had 40,000 refugees. Now, that's in relation to the population, it's like having 10 times the migrants that we have in the U.S. today, you know. Anyway, so I was able to raise some money. The Canadian government helped me a lot. USAID helped a lot. Well, anyway, and what we did, we provided classes, English classes and health classes for Salvador. Los Salvadoreños were the cane cutters. They would come and they did all the hard work. They were the cane cutters. When I read the criticisms against the migrants today, I think I'm reading what I read 40 years ago in Central America, that they're taking all the jobs. They're taking all. Nobody. If you ever tried cutting cane, buddy, that's a real man's work. I went out in the field one time, just joined them. I didn't last 4 hours. When you're cutting cane over there, the way they cut cane, they wait until the dry season. And then when it starts drying, they literally burn. They start these control fires to burn off as much of the I forgot what they called it. They had a word for it, and then they cut it, and so you're in all that smell of that burnt sugar that really gets into your lungs, and it's really hard work. But anyway, so a lot of Salvadoran refugees then learned enough English, and a lot of them went to Canada. Some on their own, or were able to come mostly to California, but most of them went to British Columbia. Every now and then I get a card from one of them. Some were little kids when I was there. Now they're in their 60s. And but that's how I got involved. Well, so when I came home, I got home. I was over at TVI, and I get a call from another Peace Corps volunteer that they needed some help. They were helping out on the border. They were going to the border and putting up. There's two organizations that were. There's more than that now, but there was an organization called the Tucson Samaritans, of which I'm a member of. And then another one was called the Green Valley Samaritans. I worked with them too. and then there's No More Deaths. There's several, and what they would do is they would there's one program in Nogales on the Mexican side where they provide food for deportees, and they provide clothing. What happens is when you get picked up, if you get picked up, the chances are you got picked up the day you got paid. So guess what? You don't show up with any money when you're retained. And in those days, they'd put you in jail for a month or two. And the jail, you notice that all these jails around close to the border, like the one we have over here, the county makes money out of it. So the longer they keep you, if you're in jail, the government's going to pay you for keeping you in jail. Okay, so it's a business.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so we would set up water in these various locations. We had a couple of professors from University of Arizona were geologists and had studied immigration for years, and they knew what trails and what time of the year normally migrants come through. And it was important to set up water, because if migrants get lost, you're going to die in that desert, buddy. See those bottles there? They buy those bottles. I painted those bottles. Those are you can only carry about 2 of those when they're full. And those won't last you more than a couple of hours in the desert. Mm. And in the desert over there, the desert and what they call a Tucson sector between California and New Mexico, that desert has a lot of bush, a lot of arroyos. You get lost. You get lost very easily. Mm. And so they estimate that there's about 10,000 migrants that have never been found. Wow. They know they're out there somewhere. They may find a wallet, or they may find something, but they don't. So anyway, some of my friends who were in the Peace Corps with me, who had retired in Arizona, they weren't from Arizona. They had retired over there. They were going to spend all their time playing golf and drinking margaritas. We would call the Border Patrol and say, we found an injured person. We're taking them to the hospital. We're taking them to such and such. So if we got stopped by the migra, then they could accuse us of illegally transporting. This way,
everything
it's up and up. We've documented, and I would say half of the time the migra was pretty cooperative. It depends on usually when you get these young migra guys that just got out of the army or something, think they're real hot shot, And then the biggest threat are those what do you call them, these self-appointed people that go around and try to, vigilantes. Those are the scary ones, because they have guns, and most of them are kind of harmless, but there's always a few crazies in the crowd. They'll get out there and they won't go into the rough roads, or they'll stop at a place, set up their cars and set up their telescopes and flags and then have a TV station come and interview them, and they claim they're protecting the border, and then as soon as the TV cameras are gone, they're gone. And of course they see us and they throw fingers at us and we throw fingers at them, which we shouldn't do because they got guns. We have signs on our vehicles that say Tucson. We got, or if I got my truck out there, one of those that are, I don't have one with me because I leave it over there. It's one of those that is magnetic, Mm-hmm. You just put them on the side. Yeah, they need. I'm gonna start recruiting some people to go with me,
Well, what do you think is going to happen now with all this supposedly raids that are going to be
It's scary.
started? It is scary
because
the economy is going to suffer.
well, of course, not only are we going to make a lot of people suffer, but the economy is going to suffer. Look, we depend on. I try to tell people, you get me. When I have somebody say, "Well, they're taking jobs," I said, "I'll tell you what. Let's find a work crew, a private work crew that's with a private company in the middle of summer. You not only will find most of them being immigrants, but they mostly come from different parts of the Latin world. You'll find 3 or 4 dialects. You'll find a dialect that's Cuban. You'll find a dialect that's from southern Mexico, and you'll find a dialect from northern. They're not even the same nationality. Mm-hmm. And then can you imagine what happened if the restaurants if they suddenly got all the dishwashers and the people who work in the restaurants?
Wow. Yeah.
And it's worse. It's worse in places like California and Texas.
Yeah, with all that agricultural states.
But you know what? They're not going to do it. You watch. They're going to do it for show. Mm-hmm. They're going to do it for show more than anything else, I think, because they're gonna do a big show, and then they're going to claim victory. Mm-hmm. That's my guess. I hope.
Yeah.
Because for one thing, the cost they're talking about close to $100 billion to be able to pull it off.
What is it? They're calculating that like 11 million people deported in 6 years. I doubt it. Or the first year, I think it's like 1 million. Anyway, but
yeah, the first time around it'll probably be, they'll show some result. Yeah, I don't know. It's more for political show, mm-hmm. But it's still dangerous because you get the freelancers. Those are the ones that are scary because mm-hmm. The self-appointed vigilantes.
No, it's going to be tough. Mm-hmm. So now you have so many stages in your life. Of course, you've been. You've done so many things, and I'm sure that a lot of us have done a lot of things, but your life has been remarkable. I mean,
thank you.
I really admire your work.
Yeah, the thing that's most important, maybe because I'm partial to education. I come from a family of 14. My dad was widowed with 8 children. My mother, who was an immigrant, was widowed with 3. When my mom and dad got married, they started out with 11. And I'm the oldest of the next batch. Mm. So there was a total of 14. There were 6 brothers. I had 6 brothers in the service. My second oldest brother was killed in the Battle of the Bulge. All of us, all the brothers, we served in the armed forces. Mm. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't, because I had a brother, and then I had cousins. Half of Martinez town was in the National Guard, like Las Vegas, and during Bataan, you look at the list of Bataan Park of how many Spanish surnames you see there. Mm-hmm. Over half of them are Spanish surnames, and they all came from the little communities like the barrios and so forth. And so people think that because I'm a retired lieutenant colonel, okay, and people think I'm a militarist. No, I'm not a militarist. When I was growing up, that's what we did. We mm-hmm. thought it was important that you be prepared to defend your country, mm-hmm. and I don't apologize for that. But when I was during the Vietnam era, people like. I remember when I was in the Peace Corps, somebody found out that I was retired from the armed forces as well, and somebody said, "Oh, you must work for the CIA."
Oh, because
Because
a lot of the military
because I had
people
been
there.
an officer, but it helped me. It helped me having been an officer, because the British Marines are really good buildings, community buildings, schools, and so forth. Uh, those buildings that are built like this, as a matter of fact, they started offering classes to revive this style. This style of furniture is referred to as, now they call it Santa Fe. It has nothing to do with Santa Fe. It's called Spanish Colonial, and the weaving is Spanish Colonial. The Navajos did not invent this kind of weaving. They didn't have sheep. Los Españoles brought the sheep and taught them how to weave. Of course, the Indians, set up their own way of setting up their own looms. But I made my own loom too. I have a big Spanish loom. It's over at my son-in-law's house. He's going to start taking weaving too.
So that's what I was going to get to. You're, after all this, activism, after all that professional work and all that, you continued with the creative part, which everything has been creative, but now you're into making furniture, into painting, into all this other stuff. So it's like a continuation of your life and different and different stages. How do you feel about that now?
Right now, for example, we're working, myself and a couple of friends that were in the class. We're going to make a banco, which is almost as long as this, and we're going to put it at Varela's Coffee House in honor and memory of Fred Harris, and of course I helped Ed make some of the pieces over at the Cultural Center. I was hoping the Hispanic Cultural Center would start a program to teach people how to make do this kind of work. For some reason, I don't know the politics of the Cultural Center, but that wasn't done. The CNM and was willing to help the Cultural Center set up the classes so it could be taught, but maybe someday it'll happen.
Oh yeah, it's a possibility,
if it's like anything else, if you don't, it's like when I go to Las Vegas, I love to go to Old Town because there's so much, and even East Las Vegas, people have managed to keep those old buildings, even though some of them don't go back as far as the Spanish era. But the fact that they've maintained their history.
No, the architecture is amazing.
But look what happened in the Alvarado Hotel here. I remember that place was just, it's not exactly the Spanish era, but it was a territorial era, and it had a particular style of doing things, and which is part of our culture, It's like these houses here. These houses are just basically cheap copies of the original houses that were all built out of adobe. This is not built out of adobe. That's a facade. In front, I just cut the facades in half. You see the in front? That's a facade.
Yeah. What do you think our future, generations need to do to continue not just the history, but the arts, education, all these things? I know that things change, and we're in a modern era, and the of course the new electronics and all that, because we grew up. I know you grew up with no television. Well, yeah, no television, yes, but computers, cell phones. I did the same thing. I didn't grow up like that, but now with all this electronic media and all that, what do you think education and the arts are going to?
I think the biggest problem we have is because we have all these things, we don't read enough books. And people just, it's amazing. You go in communities and like in El Rito and places, they have a beautiful little library, which if you ever have a chance to go record something, it was done by the community, and it's and all the furniture, everything else we did, the school did, we helped make it, and an interest in reading. I don't care. I still can't, nobody can convince me that anything will replace reading. You go to a restaurant, if you haven't noticed already, there'll be a family, and it doesn't matter whether they're poor or rich. They're all standing there with their little phones, not even carrying a conversation. And then neighbors. That's the other thing. Here, one thing I like about this neighbor, everybody knows everybody. It is, even in the barrios now, people don't do that anymore. No se necesita la gente ya. In Martinez, when I was growing up, we would go see my grandma in Chihuahua, and the only time that my parents, I ever saw them get in an argument is who had the key to the house last. Because we never used to lock. That's the truth. We never used to lock. The only time we locked it was when we were going to be out of town for more than a few days. So remember one time we told the two vecinas on the other side, check in the house once in a while. If you need anything, go in the house. The doors are open because we can't find the key. You remember those old-fashioned keys? That's what we had in that house. And then people, when I was a kid in Martinez, on Saturday afternoons, friends would come over. People would come to your house unannounced, and before long, people would start cooking. So, the mom or somebody would start making algo. Pobrecitamente, but they were doing something. Nowadays you don't dare just drop by on somebody, even your own family, unless you feel because people, they're going to be doing something, or they don't. It's just not the way people do things. There's not enough human interaction, and I think the more human interaction we have, and books do it when people can't do it on a personal basis. I think as long as people talk to each other, they know each other and get along better.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of kids that are growing up by themselves too, because they don't have. Parents have to work.
Sure.
Sometimes both parents have to work.
They have to work. People say some people work because they want the extra things. I don't know too many people that work for that reason, because they have to do that in order to survive.
That's true. That it's not because they want fancy stuff. Yeah.
My mom.
It requires.
My mom used to work. She'd go maybe twice a week. She used to take care of this. There was this couple that lived up here, a Jewish. It was the son was a doctor or a professor. I can't remember. They were Jewish people, and their mother was very elderly. So one day a week, I guess, they would have my mother come and stay with her. That was and then the other thing, my sisters gave my mother a squash blossom, and my mother didn't wear jewelry. But so what she would do with a squash blossom, every time she was short of money, she'd go down to the pawn shop and pawn it. That was her bank. and then of course, but my mother was always the one that people came to when they were collecting for the March of Dimes. My mother was the one that went door to door. The politicos who knew her would always try to get her to pass their stuff around. And it wasn't unusual. A lot of the other families were the same. People were interacting a lot in the neighborhood, We do here. My vecinos over here, my vecinas, they're a lot younger than me, but they have a sense of neighborhood here. But in other parts of town, they don't do that anymore.
Beginning one of the icons of not just Albuquerque, but in New Mexico and its surroundings. The influence and the work that Ted Martinez has done here, it's remarkable. Many of the great leaders in the state know him, and he knows the rest of them. As he mentioned, just the recent passing of Senator Fred Harris, who was he was a presidential candidate also.
He was also a former U.S. senator.
A senator, yeah.
And he was the one who was responsible for getting the sacred lake of to the Taos Indians, getting it back. Yeah. Returning it back to them. Yeah.
So many things. I mean, it's incredible, the history, and that's why we need to record, and we need those conversations with people like you that lived it, not just getting it from history books. But thank you so much for all that.